Paul LeBlond. I'm from the International Air Rail Organization. Charlie, you mentioned rail access in your speech, and I'd be grateful if you could just give us a little more detail on, I think I sensed a disappointment in the government and perhaps the rail industry's reaction to the Davies Commission's interim report. All three of you now have light rail as well as heavy rail, but could you say something about how important you feel rail access is in preventing the leakage, as I think you described it, to other competing airports? Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's a very good question. Certainly from where I stand, surface access connectivity to airports, all airports, is fundamentally important. Rail is a key part of actually helping to shrink catchments and bringing people actually closer to airports. So for example, in east-west connectivity, or high-speed 3 as it's often termed, it will actually allow people to access long-haul flights in Manchester from the east of England, equally from Liverpool and Merseyside region straight into Manchester in a relatively short period of time. At the moment, it would take you probably 2 hours to drive from Leeds to Manchester, and probably as long in a train. Now in London you can cover the same distance in probably 15 to 20 minutes, just by dint of the investment that's gone into rail networks in the London southeast area. So as I look forward and I look at rail and aviation, you have to look at both. So you have to look at high speed 2, Crossrail 1, Crossrail 2, Liverpool Street to Stansted, east-west connectivity, and then just actually think, well, what does that mean for the UK? So effectively it will have the tendency to shrink the UK. So instead of having to travel 2 hours or 3 hours to get to an airport, with much improved rail access, you can access one of 5 airports in England that can offer long-haul flights within a relatively short period of time. Now that being the case, and if rail does shrink the UK, certainly in terms of access time, you have to put that into your long-term policy in terms of where you want to put investment in rail and aviation.
I'm Dale Keller from the Board of Airline Representatives. First of all, I'm very refreshed to hear some of the views from an airline perspective that you guys definitely kind of get it, and sometimes down in London we don't always get such a concise opinion. I think from the international airline community, it's not just about UK carriers connecting overseas points. So the UK is one of the most massive two-way markets in the world, and I think sort of taking on a point earlier, the airlines do have an opinion what they want, and it's about access to one of the world's key markets. You guys are doing a great job of attracting some international network carriers in for the long haul, but fundamentally they feel blocked out of the UK's hub at the moment. But going forward, what would you like the industry or the airlines to be looking at in the interim period until we have more capacity in the southeast? Because you clearly have an ask, but the airlines aren't entirely sure what that is, because there's currently capacity in the regions and all other airports apart from the hub for airlines to launch services. So what is the actual ask in the interim?
It's really simple. I mean, we're out talking to all potential airlines and indeed existing airlines about expansion, making the business case. This is a business decision. They've got many choices about where they put their assets and where they spend their time and effort. And it's our job to persuade them that there's a viable business case to invest in my case, Edinburgh Airport, for the good of the Scottish economy. But the numbers will speak. It won't be a plea or a charitable request. It's going to be about you can make some return on your investment.
I think it is important that the government actually looks at other opportunities, such as enhanced rail connectivity, which would allow passengers to move round about the southeast and access a number of different airports much quicker. But as important from a regional perspective, the government needs to give some serious consideration to taking APD away, and then that should help stimulate demand in the regions, and it should allow capacity to grow in the regions and allow the construction programme in London to carry forward.
APD, Graham, it's not directly relevant to today's discussion, but I thought it would be the elephant in the room, particularly perhaps as far as Newcastle is concerned. What have you got to say to Gordon?
Well, we had a gentleman's agreement that we weren't going to talk about it, but no, I mean it's a very good question. There's nothing really stopping use of existing capacity other than APD. That's the crucial thing that's getting in the way, and even with APD lower, yeah, it would stimulate growth across all regions, providing there was a level playing field. But even with that, it's not going to be enough for the UK economy to delay for too long additional capacity in the southeast. So it would definitely help, but there would still be that capacity crunch that would need to be dealt with. So APD is only the only major issue that's stopping things.
To some extent, the purpose of today's conference is to focus on where we are. And where we are is we're in the final stages of consultation on 2 options at Heathrow and 1 at Gatwick. Gordon, you've more or less indicated that your preference would be for Gatwick. That is your position?
Yeah, because I think it's for 2 fundamental reasons. 3. We need the capacity. We need to get on with doing something. If we look at what is the art of the possible, mostly on a political, but also an economic in terms of cost of provision, speed of delivery, I think we've had 30 years to try and make Heathrow work and have never managed it, despite having significant periods where there's been nominal political support for it. It just hasn't happened. So when do we just acknowledge that there are too many barriers in the way of building that capacity in the west of London? And the second thing is, even if we managed to pull this one off, even if we had the political leadership that we've been so absent for many years, what would worry me is that the price that the airlines are going to be asked to pay to support that and the price that the taxpayers are going to be asked to support that still says you're going to get a poor return on that investment because you won't get the growth you'd expect. And then the final one is just sticking 90% of the long-haul network, which I think is Sir Howard's estimate of what happens, into one airport, just doesn't seem to be like offering the world's airline choice. Let's give people choice.
That's your pragmatic choice. In an ideal world, what would your preference be?
There is no such thing as there. It's about getting something done. The ideal world is we've had policies, when all the London airports were owned by BAE, we couldn't make the ideal world happen, even in their view, when there was only one voice. So it's about the deliverability. It's about getting it happening before this capacity crunch. We all in the regions utterly understand the need to get more capacity into the London system. It won't stop us doing what we're doing right for our own businesses and direct connectivity or using international hubs. But we know this crunch is coming because it's not just about connectivity through London, it's about getting to London, and that's going to be a major problem.
Charlie, of the 3 options that are under final consultation?
Yeah, again, I don't think, like Gordon, I don't think it's a simple question because you can't get to the long-term answer unless you deal with the short and medium term. So if you don't deal with the short and medium term, the UK PLC will actually start to lose growth and economic opportunity. So you have to address the short to medium term in the first place. In the long term, I've always said that a network of competing airports is the right way ahead. And it's not just simply about the economic benefit of Gatwick versus Heathrow. It's where does the UK want to be on economic grounds in 20 years' time, in 30 years' time, and what we're going to do about north-south divide and actually creating this northern powerhouse. So there are a number of factors that the government have to consider, not just simple as to where the economic benefits fall between Heathrow and Gatwick. But for me, it is a network of competing airports.
Graham?
I think our views were kind of made clear in the presentation, but surely any option that...
Yeah, I'm just trying to press you beyond that because obviously this is what's
under
consultation
Heathrow options
at the moment. I mean, there's a slight desire on your part, if I may say so, to sort of go back to something. I mean, the Commission did consider this the regional option, and we are now in a stage where we're considering the southeast option. I think we've got it, that you would actually prefer some different option, and you're presumably hoping that a government would come in and would reopen the whole thing again. But presuming for a moment that there is great pressure...
Sorry, we support Heathrow, the expansion of Heathrow.
Yeah, well, yeah. That there is... You've acknowledged that this has gone on for a long time. Various commissions have been set up, no decisions have been taken by politicians. If I can ask you please to focus on, if we got a government that was in a position to say, we do need to make a decision on this, and had those 3 options.
Heathrow,
do you have a...
Heathrow? Yeah.
Which any preference between
the 2 options, probably the northwest option rather than the long runway option. It can't be good for UK PLC to follow a strategy which looks to constrain the option that the market really wants to see. So, the figures really speak for themselves, that capping Heathrow would cap the future potential of the UK economy and would damage regions like the northeast.
Thank you very much. A question on the aisle there, please.
Hi, John Strickland, JLS Consulting. I'd just like each of the panelists to comment on against the natural desire to have choice of access to hubs, the strategic risks of, for example, relying on the Gulf carriers. They all do a good job, they've all developed massively, but if we think about political instability in the Middle East, we think about recent questions about airspace over Russia, flight reroutings from Ukraine, the strategic risk if we have a lot of our eggs in the Middle East basket. And even if we look at other overseas hub carriers in Europe, we saw Sabina, the Belgian airline, who at one point was a very big provider of feeder capacity to the regions, went out of business. That left a hole. KLM has chosen commercially to withdraw services from some UK points. I mean, a second question or second comment into the pot, the issue about the ability to maintain viably for airlines services from the regions into London. Heathrow's had less services because the capacity is not there. But we've seen greater fragility of services into other London airports in the past. They haven't lasted as long because they've not been viable.
Okay, can we take those separately? Are you relying too much on the Middle East?
The whole point of what we're doing is to give a maximum spread of opportunity. It's both about the customer choice, but it's also de-risking it for us. There is no opportunity to increase our hubbing capacity through Heathrow because Heathrow is full. So the only thing we can do is maximise our connectivity to other hubs as far as possible. That's not reliance on them or putting all eggs in one basket. It's just doing what our customers want us to do and get the biggest possible outcome in terms of growth.
Charlie?
Well, I wouldn't say that political instability across the Middle East is common. It does vary from area to area. What you have to do is you have to look at the airlines that are actually ordering planes into the long term. And if you take out the airlines that are operating in the Middle East, you might actually not need another runway in London.
Graham?
You know, we're absolutely delighted to have an Emirates service to Dubai, so we see that as, you know, a very, very important part of our future. But the point I was making about having a hub on UK soil really allowed the country in the future to cover all bases in terms of what might happen elsewhere in the future. You know, if you look at some of the hubs in Europe, they may start to be constrained. They may not get any more runways. Things may change. And we have a lot less influence over what happens overseas than we have in our own country. So, you know, we very much see the delivery of an expanded UK hub at Heathrow as being in the best interests of the sort of geopolitical situation for the UK in the future.
Could I go straight on and ask you to answer the question on the fragility of the services that have gone into other London airports?
Yeah, I mean, what we are certainly not arguing is that somehow we should create something for a whole host of non-commercially viable air services. They clearly need to be able to stand on their own 2 feet and operate. You know, so the expansion of Heathrow, it should be a mechanism which would allow for, you know, a greater number of commercially viable operations, not ones that need to be propped up on an ongoing basis.
Gordon?
Well, the data's not there for Edinburgh in particular. There's not being any significant issues around service failures other than the latest one with Little Red, which I think is peculiar to the fact that it's this somewhat artificial allocation of 4 slots which don't really stack up. All our evidence is that the growth is there. The airlines have been successful, and we've just seen 2 new startups. So I don't recognise what you're saying. I think it may be more about the fragility of the airports at the other end.
Charlie?
Well, I think same as Gordon, really. I mean, in Stansted, we've recently got new routes coming in from a number of places into Stansted Airport, and so far they've been successful. But again, we've only had Stansted for 2 years, and the more we improve the facilities and the customer service, we actually expect those routes to be viable long term.
David Bentley of Kappa. There seems to be an outright supporter of Heathrow on the platform, Mr. Mason, the de facto supporter, Mr. Dewar, and one who isn't a supporter, Mr. Cornish. To what degree do you take into account the views of your travelling public? I don't know if you're aware, but at the World Travel Market a few weeks ago, there was a poll taken. It's the first poll I've ever seen taken of the public on this issue. And of the 84% of people who were in support of increased airport capacity in the UK, 39% of them wanted it to be at regional airports. And only 16% at Heathrow and 16% at Gatwick. Now, I think I'm being a bit unfair to you here. I should really be asking the Commission that. To what degree do you take into account the views of the public? I just wondered whether you do polls of your own and to what extent they influence your thinking on this.
Graham?
No, despite the fact that I'm a Newcastle United supporter, I'm also a realist, and there's no doubt that all of us in the regions would love to be able to fly, to a whole host of different places direct from the regional airports. So I'm sure that those customers are voting on that basis. But the realities are that we have to have a mix of point-to-point services and connections via hubs, which is exactly what our strategy is to deliver that choice.
Clearly in Manchester and Stansted, it's our intention to add more routes and add more long-haul routes and satisfy that local demand. That is our plan.
Yeah, absolutely the same. I've actually on the record as saying if I ever turn an airline away through lack of capacity, I'll resign, because we don't have any excuse to have that. We can build, we've got the space, we'll do it. And we'll encourage everyone to come and do direct services or connect to any new hubs that they want to do. But it's not one or the other. The London connection, even if it's only point-to-point, is already constrained. It's our biggest market. We need capacity in London to keep that system operating. Our preference would be the one that we think can get delivered and the one that provides maximum competition for customer service.
Charlie Cornish, Graham Mason and Gordon Dewar, thank you all very much indeed.
Well done.
Yes.